Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning. I'm Siobhan Martin from the Local Government Digital Office, and today I'm joined by Isabel McKnight, Chief Officer for Strategic Commissioning and Customer Development at Stirling Council. This morning's webinar is part of our innovation project here at the Digital Office, and Isabel will be giving a presentation on the work that Stirling Council have done with CivTech. To develop a solution that's gave them a better understanding of why their customers contact them, and enabled them to collect data to help them design better services, processes and procedures. So Isabel's presentation will last around 20 minutes this morning, and as usual we'll have a question and answer session afterwards. So if you have any questions regarding the presentation or anything else, then please use the chat box throughout the webinar to pop them in there, and we'll pick them up during the session afterwards. This morning's webinar is being recorded, so you can access that at a later date and share with your colleagues. So without further ado, I will pass over to Isabel to get started.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me along this morning, Siobhan. It's great to be here, and it's great for me to sing the praises of the CivTech process and take everyone through what's been a really kind of innovative and probably groundbreaking process for Stirling. I'll give you a wee bit of background about myself. I've been in Stirling now for just over 4 years. I came to Stirling as head of procurement, and in my promoted post, I'm now responsible for customer services. That includes the contact centre, all of our customer contact through to complaints, compliments. Head of IT, also I took on IT around 18 months ago, and I've recently taken on responsibility for planning and performance. I'm also doing an interim Deputy Chief Exec's post at the Council for a 6-month period. So, without further ado, I'll begin my presentation. CivTech, what is CivTech? CivTech for me is probably something that is quite new to others that are not within the kind of procurement world. CivTech for me is about the kind of problem-based procurement that I think some of us only dream about. So this was an opportunity for Stirling to kind of grab hold of a process that was unique, and also probably I had something good for me was that our chief exec was totally bought in. So for me, I had buy-in right from the top, right from the very beginning. So the chief executive came to me at some point early 2017. I think he himself and the deputy chief exec had been at a Solus conference that Alexander Holt had been at, and him and I had spoken before about problem-based procurement and what Barcelona had done and Dublin had done. And for those of you who don't know a bit about that, it'd be quite good for you to Google it. Barcelona, their model in terms of problem-based procurement was they had a bit of a light bulb moment, thinking about what are the problems that the city face, and they looked at it in a completely different way. Rather than going out to tender for solutions, they went out with problems and challenges. So I've always been intrigued by that. And this was really an opportunity for us to get involved at a really early stage. At that point, back in January 2017, it was really just discussions with the chief executive, and then he came to me in May and said, right, we need to think what that challenge might be. So CivTech are funded by the Scottish Government. It's also for me a vehicle to harness and capture innovation through procurement. It is a process changer. It's a real process changer, and I think the cost avoidance can be measured in terms of return on investment. And I know for us being involved in CivTech too, that's been a big part of the kind of case study for us. If we look at traditionally what procurement does, a really big procurement exercise can take around 2 years and then even longer to implement and customise, and done this myself, so it's not something that I'm trying to preach to others. We specify things to death, and we're over prescriptive, and we try and cover all avenues. And actually, what you find is we're actually going to market with a solution and then trying to almost fit a square peg into a round hole. That's not always the case, but generally that's what we find. And then we end up with a solution we have to customise further. And in some cases, it is a case of crash and burn, and we just have to kind of recover what we can. Also, traditional procurement tends to be not risk aware, more risk averse. So what did the CivTech or the CivTech 2 challenge do for me? What it brought for us was we looked at the challenges that we had. Now, we looked at various areas, and we looked at health, for example, where we as a council knew that we had an aged population, as with most other councils, but our age demographics are probably much more significant than some other councils. We knew that particularly people in the rural areas were presenting themselves at accident emergency on a regular basis. So we considered, could we do something with health? Could we do something with loneliness? However, the other big challenge was around our customer service area, and we really didn't have that single view of the customer. So very quickly, our chief executive kind of got me in a room and said, yeah, I like the customer challenge, Isabel. That's really at the heart of everything that we do. I think the others might just be a bit big, and we might need to, some of the difficulties might be getting other stakeholders involved. So the CivTech challenge that we chose was around that single view of our customer. The challenge approach has allowed us to really just think about what the challenge is. What's the problem? What was the problem that we had? It allowed us to collaborate at various stages through the process that we'll talk about a bit later, and it's actually given us a co-developed solution. So it's been a really cathartic process. It's solutions driven, and what I liked about it throughout the process, we were continually risk aware. So it's got us thinking differently about where we need to be in terms of some of our challenges within the council. So our introduction was that we put an application in May in 2017. CivTech had already ran their beta the year before, which unfortunately we weren't part of, but NSS and other organisations were. We had a bit of learning to do, and we got lots of learning from Alexander and his team around what that process meant, the benefits, yes, some of the risks around it, and how those risks could be managed. So in terms of the process, Alexander took us through the process from May 17 right through to demo day on the 8th of January 2018. There was around, I think there was 8 or 9 challenges as part of CivTech 2. It took, as I say, almost 8 or 9 months to get to demo day, and there was lots and lots and lots of work in between. If we look at the CivTech methodology, it kind of goes through it in compartments. So we have the challenges up front, and then we go to market, as we do through Public Contracts Scotland. We lodged that procurement ourselves, so we're completely in control of the process, and they're solely working with us through each different stage, and it's all managed through PCS. So when we got to exploration stage, so after the initial bids were in, I think for this we had around 7 or 8 bids. We shortlisted down to 3 companies. Quite interestingly, from the initial bids, when we scored the actual application before we interviewed, the shortlist was completely different. So the individual organisations that we thought were better in paper scored less at presentation once we had that opportunity to drill down to some of the technical aspects of the bid. So we worked intensely. This is the different piece around for CivTech, which is really, really quite interesting and great for me because my chief executive was brought in. So was the deputy chief exec from the start. So we procured those 3 organisations for a 3-week period. We paid them £3,000 each to try and develop and work with us up to the next stage of the selection process. At the next stage, we actually then took 2 companies through. For us, the bidder that we selected was an organisation called Dogfish, who have now been rebadged as VidaTech. They were our preferred bidder. However, what CivTech saw through the challenge was another organisation that scored really high, an organisation called Witten. Their solution was slightly different. However, what they saw was they saw the opportunity, and we then decided that rather than just take one organisation through, we saw the benefits of both organisations. So at that stage, we worked with both organisations for a solid 3 months, working with both successful bidders to develop each of their solutions. Unfortunately for Witten, after that 3 months period, we were unable to take that to the next stage. However, they have been successful through private organisations in terms of trying to develop that solution further. I'll talk a bit about our challenge. I'm really intrigued by the process, but I think what CivTech got us to do was really think about what is it we want to achieve rather than what's our challenge, rather than think about the solution at the end, which I probably as default tend to do. So it's got me thinking completely different. So we felt that there was an opportunity existed to gain better understanding of the reasons why our customers contact the council, and to gather and make visible data that will help us to design our services much better to meet our customer needs. Also look at our processes, both internally and externally. Can customers contact us through an app? To proactively take action when service trends indicate issues or challenges. And we didn't before this make the best use of our data. We also looked at how we could harness the power of innovative technologies to better understand and serve our citizens, and that's been key to this whole process. Citizens were really important. We got citizens involved at that early stage. We got our employees involved at a very early stage, and again, what we wanted to do was we wanted to create some kind of dashboard for a chief executive and the deputy chief executive to say, here's what our customers want, here's how we're performing, and can I do that on a regular basis? Up until then, we weren't able to do that. So what was our commitment through the process? Our commitment was that we would make much better use of our data. We've got lots and lots of data, as everybody knows. We would communicate much better, both internally with our internal customers and across service areas. We would look at the citizen at the centre of everything that we did, and embrace that approach of collaboration. I think that bit at the end is really, really important, because I think since the shortly back in 2017 up until now, we've been intensely involved with VidaTech every step of the way, and we've brought our staff and our citizens along with us on that journey. So there has been barriers. We've had the naysayers, we've had the individuals have said, no, we've always done it this way, why are we changing things? But we've also had staff energised through the process to make things more transparent and to better understand the customers. Because all that the chief executive heard about was the things that everybody else probably hears about was, the bins have been missed, my bin's not been uplifted in this day, I've not had a response to my complaint. And actually, if we used the data better and understood through that single view the customer, we would know where our challenge areas were, our challenge services were. So that was really quite an interesting part of the process. So the process in summary was that, I think I said earlier, we had about 7 notes of interest. We actually had 14. We had 7 bids. We had 4 through the exploration stage, 2 accelerator, and we had 2 products at the end. So the process is really, it was quite challenging for me to look at it in those compartments, but it was really quite cathartic. It was quite cathartic. And I think the other thing that CivTech brought for us was that kind of technical expertise. So the things that they could draw out from these young organisations wasn't something that I had experience with. So we used their knowledge and skills to do some of that. That was also very, very useful as part of the process. Again, CivTech we've launched now CivTech 3. We've been through the process, and Demo Day happened earlier this month. So we've now had 2 challenges through this process, one of which was really innovative, and I think we've got plaudits across Scottish Government for how we've involved our young people. So it was around young people's mental health, and what's been created is a virtual app so that people can access confidential information if they feel that they have any kind of mental health issue, and it can also signpost them to other supports in a confidential way. So what did the solution bring us? It brought us the product in terms of our challenge for our customers called Kodo. So what we've now got is process efficiencies. It hasn't been an easy journey, and we've had staff have needed to look at. So, for example, we picked up waste, and within waste they had over 400 different processes for responding to things. So we've now pulled that down to about 20 different processes, so you can see the benefit. And first of all, we've now got customer data in one place. That means that when we try to retrieve data, it can be really quick and painless. We have permission-based access that allows admin users to set up different roles and permissions. So that's all in place from the onset. Kodo now helps us to make decisions much easier. We can now look at problem areas because we've made much better use of our data. We know where the problem areas are. We've currently only rolled out the solution to 3 areas: waste, complaints, and our contact centre. And we probably won't be fully out of the complaint service for about another 12 weeks. And at that point, we plan to roll it out across land and environmental services. It's taken us a lot of time, but throughout this process, what we've saw is behavioural change. We have less naysayers now. People are bought in. We have champions now. They see the benefit. It's had a significant impact in the silo mentality that sits across the organisation. Departments are working much better together. We've now got much more up-to-date information in our source, which is our intranet, so people can have real-time information, particularly around if there's a challenge with waste. We've now introduced another piece of software called Web Aspects, and we've done that together and streamlined the Kodo process around our Web Aspects route planner. So the other thing that it's made us look at is some of the software and the applications that we are now starting to decommission, because I think that is about people being really comfortable with some old technology and that kind of fear of moving away. So the customer champions have helped us a bit with that. So that's helped with the behavioural change. So just to kind of summarise, the Kodo solution has triggered a virtuous cycle where there's increased process efficiency now. So we can see that in waste, and we can see that in the contact centre. There's better decisions, and some of that has been down to the key behavioural changes. So because we're able to do things much quicker and we've got that single view, we're able to make those changes based on facts and written evidence and actually what the customer's asking us. It will help us improve the customer service ecosystem. We are, as I say, yet to cascade across the organisation. That's probably going to take us another year to 18 months. Kodo has absolutely helped us to identify and meet our customer needs. Some organisations will be using lagging. That was our preferred it's almost just a complaints tool, if I'm being honest. That's the way that I would describe it in terms of what Stirling used it for. So we're now in the process of decommissioning lagging, and that wasn't used holistically across the organisation. So the benefits of lagging were never achieved. The other thing is the benefits in terms of improved reputation. So now in terms of waste, believe me, we had hundreds and hundreds of complaints. That's reduced dramatically. And I think the efficiency savings will be through the channels shift by being much more digitally connected and having much more real-time information on our website so that customers can self-serve. I think the other benefit for me in terms of this process is we've been at the heart of co-developing the software with VidaTech, and we've had staff that had bought in, albeit not all at the early stages, but I think once staff understood the benefit, and where we were trying to head in terms of not only the benefit for the citizen, but the benefit for our internal customers, there's been a lot more buy-in, and some of those naysayers are now champions. So we're using those champions to roll out across the organisation. And for me, I think what it's given us is we know our customers better. There's been huge cost avoidance for me as well. So I think we had set aside earlier, as I say, just over 2 million to go and buy a CRM. We've not done that. So there's probably been cost avoidance for me around 1.6 million. It might not be as much as that, because if we want to develop this further, I don't know what challenges we might have when we start to roll it out across other areas of service. But again, that's something that we can manage year on year. It's not something, I don't have a definitive timeline when this needs to be finished. I think the way that we've looked at it is it's in an agile way. We need to fix the problems and the challenges before we move to the next area of service. It kind of feels like we got there in the end, and we're still developing. So thanks very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'll hand you back to Siobhan.
Thanks very much, Isabel. That was a fantastic presentation, nice and clear through the stages of the process that you've taken. So we'll move on to the Q&A session now. If any of the attendees have got any questions, then please use the chat box function to ask. And if you do have any questions after the webinar as well, please don't hesitate to email us at info@digitaloffice.scot, and Isabel will probably be able to help you out with that. So just as we're waiting to see if there's any questions that come in, our next webinar on the Innovation webinar series will be on Wednesday the 20th of March, and we'll be joined by Molly Kerr from the City of Edinburgh Council on that one. Molly was on our first Innovation webinar, and she sort of explored the procurement opportunities for innovation. So she will be doing a more in-depth presentation on that there. So we'll be sharing the link after this webinar, so please look out for that and sign up if you're interested. So Isabel, there is a couple of questions in for you. The first one, you touched on slightly more of the advantages of this process and what you have gained from this, but what has been the biggest challenge that you've faced with this project?
I think the biggest challenge for me has been some of the behaviours that we've had to manage internally. And that's less about the process and more about maybe just where Stirling has been as a council. And I think while the chief executive was brought in, my peers at a senior management level was brought in, it's really, really difficult to get people to start to think differently. It was also very difficult for procurement people, because people in procurement are, some staff in procurement, I'm not going to say everybody, but staff in procurement are kind of probably being forced to have that kind of risk-averse attitude and that kind of work ethic because of the previously, less so now, but that fear of challenge. So that was probably, there's probably a couple of things in there, but I think the biggest challenge was the behaviours and trying to get people to think differently and trying to get people to change and stop using particular bits of software or bits of kit that actually have no benefit. And the way that we did it by having that kind of collaborative approach has kind of helped that. So we now have champions. I think that has been the biggest challenge.
Yeah, you did mention that you had the chief exec bought in from day one, so that's almost one of the biggest challenges sometimes. So I'm guessing from moving forward, this is key that the chief exec can go on and see exactly why decisions are being made or why things need to be done within Stirling. Would you agree with that then?
Yep, absolutely. So I think from this, what's been set up is we now have a digital board and we have a massive digital portfolio. So that got us thinking about where we need to be in terms of that kind of move to channel shift and doing things, being much better digitally connected and doing things in a much linear way. The other thing is it's pushed us to be much more agile, and that's difficult. That's really difficult, for example, for our finance colleagues to do, because when you work in this confined year-on-year budget period, it's really difficult to kind of project what our spend might be. So everything's changed, and I think the key thing for me is to include everyone at the beginning of this process. That was probably something that we didn't do with our finance colleagues until later on in the process, and it's only just now that they'll start to realise that, yeah, this is a different way of doing things. We won't have all the answers in year one, and we're going to have to make provisions, over maybe a 2 to 3 year period. It needs to be that agile way of working. So, yeah.
You're keen to not far. I'm not sure how far you are down the route of this at the moment, but in terms of reporting, is for example reporting to the board, etc., is it really easy to sort of pull those stats out of like the system that you're going to be using, just in terms of statistics to make those decisions?
Yes, it is, but only for waste and complaints in the contact centre. So because we haven't rolled it out across services, however, we've had particular issues with our waste services in terms of just the level of customer inquiries and customer complaints, and there's been some technical issues there that have attributed to that, like the kind of vehicles that we have and the kind of bins that we have. These things you cannot solve that issue overnight, because that comes at a great cost. But it's helped us to kind of look at that and say, yep, we're going to have to invest in new bins because the bins that we have are no fit for purpose. Some of the vehicles that we have are no longer fit for purpose, so there's going to have to be capital investment. So it's helped to support that agenda and helped to support that business case. So that's probably a really good example where decisions have been made on the back of the knowledge that we know in terms of, the level of, and unfortunately it's around the level of customer complaints and inquiries, but it has informed the process.
Definitely, that's great. And in terms of the sort of next stages or other areas that are sort of key for Stirling Council at the moment, what are you going to be looking at next?
I think we're going to try and look at, is there something that we can do with our procurement process to look at things differently? Could we have something internally that maybe in a lower level looks at some of the challenges that we have? Because I think this is really, for those procurement people that are out there, this is really something that we could do in terms of some of the quick quotes that we have that are much less onerous, rather than going out being so prescriptive. And then is there something that we can do in terms of that challenge base, and doing that below the threshold might be much easier. So we're kind of looking at that. We've yet to have discussions about CivTech 4, but I'm sure my colleagues in education and in social care are already got their thinking caps on, because this is not now something I might have led the process initially, because we now have had another 2 challenges. One was around housing, one was around young people's mental health. So there's other areas of the service have been kind of bought in now and see the benefits of that collaborative approach. So we've already got our thinking caps on. Because I'm a procurement person at heart, I think I'm already thinking about what can I do to my process that will make this much easier, less bureaucratic, and actually support some local provision. So that's where my head is right now.
The next question was sort of just around the difference between the traditional procurement methods and why you sort of recommend using this sort of newer, fresher approach. And from you being procurement for a long time and local government for a long time, I think you sort of nailed that a minute ago. So I suppose the last sort of question you touched on slightly throughout your presentation, but what has been the feedback from sort of customers and staff so far? You did mention that your complaint levels, etc., came down, but have you had sort of more in-depth feedback around that?
I think we've I suppose initially we did have lots of naysayers. And I think when a service is continually berated around, with a significant level of inquiries, a significant level of complaints, I kind of understand why they were kind of challenging doing something differently, because they're already bogged down with this, probably a level of I'm trying to think of the best use of words here. I think they almost felt berated, and nothing that they ever done was of quality. So we kind of changed that. We had to try and kind of work through that process and see that, look, this isn't about staff's effort. This is about the kit that we have. This is about some of the processes that we have internally. And if we look at managing our inquiries and managing our complaints much better, it will free up some of the time to focus on some of the technical aspects that we need to address and get the business case completed. It felt as if, so I think for me, it's only just recently, probably over the last 4 or 5 months, that the waste service are actually telling us, yeah, you're absolutely right, this is so much better, we're in a much better place. They were actually quite guarded previously about telling us about the number of inquiries they had. So I'm not saying that there were complaints. The inquiries were just around, an individual's bin needed to be replaced because basically the bin lorries were chewing up the bin. So that was a huge issue. But that's a technical issue. That's not something that somebody sitting behind a telephone can resolve quickly. So there needs to be buy-in from across the council to do that. And I think that's probably been a real showstopper for me. You need to understand, when you start to delve into a service and the way they do things, don't be critical from the onset. You need to understand where they are at that moment in time. So that's been a wee bit of a learning curve for me as well.
Yeah, I think from a lot of the presentations that we have, the biggest thing is around the culture and changing that mindset right across the board. And I think it's fair to say that not many people like change. So it is bringing people on board and really seeing the benefits and the return of investment that they're going to get, and actually making their day-to-day job life a whole lot easier, and feel like they're contributing to something big. So that's sort of the final question this morning, Isabel. As I said earlier on, I'd be happy to sort of answer any questions that the attendees have after the webinar. So email info@digitaloffice.scot if you do want to follow up on anything. The main aim of the partnership, of course, is to share sort of information and experiences. So I'm sure Isabel will be happy enough to help with that. So mentioned earlier on, next webinar is on the Wednesday the 20th of March at 1 o'clock with the City of Edinburgh Council, and we'll be sharing the link here afterwards, I think maybe this afternoon. The recording of this session will be popped up on YouTube later on as well, so that will be shared, and we do encourage you to share that with your colleagues. So just to wrap up, I would like to thank Isabel this morning. The presentation was fantastic and it was great to have you along. And on behalf of the Digital Office, I'd like to thank you and Stirling Council for your time. Thanks very much.